So Marion does not want to see Colonel Tynes take over what Weems has been doing because they're destroying his men's plantations, and so he goes out to Tiercoat Swamp, attacks them. It's interesting because one of the very few people who die in that battle is Emos Gaskin, who is known as the Devil at the time because he is giving up the names of all these people. So that's another interesting story about that.
You are listening to Historyman, the platform for historians, curators, and authors to tell their stories of the American Revolution, walk in the footsteps of heroes, and proclaim freedom reigns. On today's episode, we are with Paul Graham, South Carolina Revolutionary War historian, the director of the American Heritage Festival on Graham's Historical Farm in Lake City, South Carolina, and director of the American Living History Foundation. So welcome, Paul.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Before we start, tell us a little bit about Graham's Farm.
Graham's Farm is in Lake City, South Carolina. It's in former Williamsburg, and before that was Craven County.
Okay.
It is a farm we've had in our family since the early 1700s. It is a farm that my dad always told me that I was going to inherit someday. And it had always been in the Graham family, and he wanted to make sure it went to me, and it actually went to me and my brothers. But anyway, it used to be in Graham's Crossroads. It used to be called, Lake City used to be called Graham's Crossroads.
Is that right?
So, yeah, so it's kind of been our little niche in the woods for all this time.
Now, Lake City was at one time a tobacco hub.
Correct.
In the South.
I have childhood memories of being on a tractor pulling all these tobacco leaves to a warehouse,
right,
where they were bidding on.
Right.
Yeah, I have childhood memories of that.
It is a great agricultural community, and it's really a dying industry in many respects. But it's a beautiful part of the state. So Graham's, it used to be called Graham's Crossroads.
Yes.
After your family.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. So what exactly do y'all do out there every year?
We have the American Heritage Festival.
Okay.
The land is very historical, but there's not a lot of structures left.
Okay.
A lot of them. We used to have a historical home there, original home, and unfortunately that burned down in, I think it was 1996, before I inherited the farm, so didn't have much to do with that. The structures, what's left of the structure is still there. We have an old tobacco barn that we've refurbished. We still need to do a little more refurbishing, and we have a cabin out there. But mostly it's fields, and it's a pretty farm because the fields are surrounded by woods. You feel really in nature when you're out there, and you feel I don't want to say isolated, but away from the hustle and bustle of the world. So.
Right. So the festival, what does that entail? For some of our listeners, they may have in their minds Ferris wheels and all sorts of kiddie rides and stuff like that, but that's not what we're talking about at all.
No. The reason I did this festival is to have a starting point for the history I was looking into and had found. And so we started out by getting the 2nd South Carolina Regiment to join in and start this Revolutionary War festival, which has since grown. But so Eric Nason came out with the 2nd South. We had some Brits, but we also had we had entertainment. We have entertainment there, music. We have speakers, historical speakers. I call it a mobile museum because it's really under a tent, but we have things like artifacts from the American Revolution that were passed down from the family down. And also I have, most of the time I just give copies of original paperwork from that time period, receipts from some pretty well-named people in the American Revolution.
Right.
And then we have sutlers who come in and they sell their 18th century wares. We have presenters who show what it was like to trade at that time, or to build a musket, or to build furniture, those type of things. We have Fletcher Moon in the culture of beer usually. This time I think he's going to do, it's going to be more, I think he's going to call it libations of the colonial period. And he's very entertaining, and he talks about how beer and alcohol are related to society from, the Stone Age to now, and he's very interesting to listen to. And so we have some really good speakers that we bring in, really good historians, a lot of authors, and then each field that we have on the farm has a different scene. So you will go to the Continentals field, where they'll have cannons and tents and firing muskets and just showing how they get ready for battle. And then we'll have a British field for the Brits. And then we have the field for sutlers and presenters. Then we have, I want to say, current field for food and music, and so people can enjoy themselves while they're there. And then we also have, we've expanded since then to bring in more people who may not be interested in the American Revolution, but want to see something else. And so we kind of drag them in to see that, and then they'll see a little bit about the American Revolution. So we do have World War II reenactments and a field for that, and we have World War I. That's more of a living history display. We're expecting 2 to 3 biplanes this year, though, so we're excited about that. So then we have South Carolina Motor Vehicles, Military Vehicles Association that comes in each year. And they're going to kill me for not pronouncing that right. But they bring in all these different military vehicles throughout the...
So when is this thing?
This is February 18th and 19th this year. It's always on President's Day weekend because we like to have that extra Monday off for people. Because we get people from all over the country to come to the festival. And
how would they reach you? I mean, how would they find information online or?
You can go to the American Heritage Festival on Facebook, or you can go to our website, which is theamericanheritagefestival.com.
Tell me how you got into the Revolutionary War historian, especially you said South Carolina Revolutionary War history. Tell me how you got into that.
My grandfather was born on the farm. He grew up on that farm. He went off to World War I, and he actually was a medic for the 94th Aero Squadron. And he changed his origination papers to Detroit, Michigan, so that he was not flown back to South Carolina. He was flown back to Michigan because he wanted to go and work in the car industry.
Okay.
So, here we are 100 years later, and I'm inheriting this farm that I was told that always was in our family. And I went up to I would call him my granduncle's attic, so that would be my grandfather's brother. And he had artifacts, furniture, paperwork, all the way from the 1700s through the American Revolution, through the Civil War, through the First World War, all the way up to now. And meaning paperwork, colonial furniture, artifacts from our ancestors who fought in the American Revolution. I have a starter that goes around the guy who would have been Hugh Graham's neck when he was fighting, so that he can pour just the right amount of powder into his musket. Yeah, and then powder horn and all kinds of different things that just fascinate. I had a piece of paperwork from signed by Moultrie, William Moultrie, and it just fascinated me. And so I collected all this and tried to figure out, how did this all happen? Why do I own this farm? And what happened here? What's going on? Why do I have all this?
So history is really not your background, though, is it?
No, but I always loved history. I just could never felt like I could make a living at it or anything. So this just kind of fell in my lap, and I'm like, wow, I just love this. This is fun. This is kind of like discovery. You're always discovering something new, and kind of exciting sometimes because this thing ends up being very, very closely related to Francis Marion and the Southern Campaign. So
your relative that was fighting in the Revolutionary War, what was his name?
Well, I had multiple relatives that were fighting in the Revolution, but as far as my fifth great grandfather was Hugh Graham. He was living on the farm with his father, Nielsen Graham, and he fought under Marion for I think it was about 45 or 46 days. He also supplied Marion and the the Continental Army. So he would be one of my direct. I actually have two other ancestors who fought under Marion. So there's a lot going on here that I discovered, and I'm still discovering, and I enjoy it. It's fun.
So
it's a good hobby.
Why do you think he just served for 45 days as opposed to the whole Revolutionary War time period?
My guess is that he was more of a pacifist. Probably didn't want to fight in the war, but was willing to support him. From the records I see, they used it as a refuge for, hiding, to resupply, to get, food, horses, that type of thing. And another thing is I think he was older.
How old was he?
I'm guessing he was in his 40s,
Okay.
which...
Yeah.
At that time period, I know Marion was in his, I think, 40s too, but I think, at that time period, 40s was getting pretty old to be out running around on a horse.
Right.
Especially if you've never been in the military prior to that. So Marion had that luxury of knowing what he was doing and being used to it. He was a planter, he was a farmer. So, but now I have other... I'm a descendant of Zachariah Owens, who he fought for, I think it was 336 days, 26 battles from Camden all the way up to Utah Springs.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who did he fight with?
Marion. Yeah.
Fought with Marion.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Man.
Yeah. And then I have another one who's James McCutcheon, who was a dragoon. He was a sergeant. He fought with Marion at Siege of Savannah.
Okay.
Yep. So, and those are kind of just scratching the surface, and that's the kind of neat thing about it, because if you go, he had a big family. He had uncles, he had his father, he had daughters, he had son-in-laws, he had parents of his, or I should say, father-in-laws of his kids, all fighting. Or supporting Marion. And so it gets very complicated because there's quite a number of people fighting with him or supporting the effort.
What years are we talking?
Well, there's one Captain John Graham who he was fighting with Marion since the Indian Wars.
Okay.
So he had been with them throughout, but the heat of everything was right after Camden to December of 1780. There were other things that happened afterwards that they were involved in, but I would say the heat of everything would be between September 1780, maybe even August, to the end of 1780.
Did anything happen on the Graham's farm?
Well, the biggest thing that happened on Graham's farm was, here's a good story. I knew that we had receipts for a detachment of Marion brought in British prisoners through the farm on their way to Cheraw, to General Harrington in Cheraw. So I knew that, and it's kind of interesting, but I had to figure out, well, where did these guys come from?
Right.
So originally, I did figure out that it was from the Battle of Tiercoat. So that's kind of a nice find in itself, okay, we were somehow involved in the Battle of Tiercoat and all. But then the story just keeps developing more. About a year or two ago, I learned that Arthur Graham, Hugh's brother, lived at Tiercoat Swamp. He lived over there on Black River. He also has claims against the American Revolution, as does Hugh. Because I always wondered, why would these prisoners come through our farm, right? And so this is just one story of where you're trying to figure out, what's making this all happen. And I found a receipt from a Mr. Gillard from Fort Hort. And the receipt now is later in the war. It's in 1782. But the same person signed Hugh's receipt as he did Arthur's receipt. See, I didn't even know that there was a brother over there until Another historian, a woman's name is a very good researcher, is Dee Green. And she said, hey, my ancestor's Arthur Graham, and he's living at Tiercoat Swamp, and I think we're related. So the closest thing I could find is that receipt. The receipt from this person was done, I think, late August 1782, and then a couple weeks later he's over at Arthur's farm signing the same receipt, same person. So I know they're related there. And so some of this stuff is a little bit of guesswork because you don't have all the pieces. But I'm fairly certain that they were brothers, and that's kind of the reason why Marion went to that area, because they would have been part of his network. They would have known each other. They would have gone over there and then said, hey, we'll just send them through my brother's farm because that thing's, we're connected to the PD River in the back of our farm. And at the time it was surrounded by woods. So that is a fun thing to learn. But then it keeps developing. What happens is Weems is out there destroying plantations, homes, burning crops, killing livestock for the rebels. He's attacking the rebels. And he is being attacked because there's a man named Emos Gaskin who is between our farm and Indiantown Church. He's living there. He knows who the rebels are. And so Weems is using this person to find the right places to destroy. So eventually Weems has to report back to Charleston. And so they bring in Colonel Tynes. And Colonel Tynes is a loyalist, not regular army. And he gets resupplied. So I don't have the exact numbers, but it's, I want to say 80 saddles and all new horses and all new guns, muskets. And so Marion does not want to see Colonel Tynes take over what Weems has been doing because, they're destroying his men's plantations. And so he goes out to Tiercoat Swamp, attacks them. It's interesting because one of the very few people who die in that battle is Emos Gaskin, who is known as the devil at the time because he is giving up the names of all these people. So that's another interesting story about that. And then there's another one after that because Marion says, well, Tynes got away, so we need to go find him and bring him back. So he assigns a guy named, pretty sure it's Robert Snipes. He's from Snipes Plantation. He's a captain. I hope I got the first name right. It's either Robert or John or something. So he assigns this task of going to find Tynes who got away in the swamps. And a couple weeks later, he gets them. He finds Tynes. He finds his junior officers. And he also finds some justices of the peace that they're not happy with. And those are the prisoners that are coming through the farm. I think there were 23 prisoners. But the interesting part about this is that Snipes wants to be promoted. He wants to be a major now. He's a captain. And Peter Ory and Francis Marion don't want to promote him for whatever reason that is. I don't know. But so he decides, well, I'm going to go over and fight with Sumter and see if he'll give me a promotion. So he goes over there, and basically it was told that, hey, if we'll give you the promotion, but you got to muster your own men. You got to get as many men as you can, and you can lead them, and you can be a major. And so he goes and does that. And he's on his plantation, the Snipes plantation. He's got 21 soldiers, including himself. And lo and behold, who comes around, which I didn't even know were in the South at the time, is the Queen's Rangers. The Queen's Rangers come in. They came from New York. You see the show Turn, the Queen's Rangers, same guys. They come in from New York through Charleston, come up to his plantation, and wipe them out. There's only 3 guys that lived after that, and one of them is Snipes. So that's another story off just this one little thing. And then it keeps going. I got another one. So I'm looking at a article in the Gazette, London Gazette, and it is, I believe it is in October 1780. And Cornwallis is reporting back to, the home country, to I think the prime minister at the time was North, Robert North. He's saying, hey, I've done a great job. We took over Charleston. That's defeated. We went up and met Gates at Camden, defeated them. Everything's going really, really well. But I don't have the exact words, but he kind of references, except for this little area between the PD River and Black River. That little area we're having a little bit of a problem with the rebels. And I think that's kind of funny because that ended up being a pretty big problem.
That's right.
So that's just one story out of Tiercoat Swamp. And so things keep going like that. Tiercoat Swamp was more of a surprise attack on Colonel Tynes and his loyalist men who were just fresh men. They really didn't. But Gaskin was there, and he was really a neighbor of our farm. In fact, in later generations, the Gaskins married into our family, so that's how close they were to who the rebels are. I don't remember how long after, but
Well, I'm certainly envious of the way that you're able to track your heritage back to those times. I think most Americans now can't do that. And the fact that you're able to do that is just fascinating to me. And, that's cool stuff. As we wind down our episode here, tell us a little bit about your American Living Heritage Foundation. What is that about?
So the foundation is a 501c3, and it's kind of the engine that we're using to develop the American Heritage Festival, but eventually we'd like to have some kind of infrastructure on the farm. And we'd like to have some kind of a research and learning center for Francis Marion and in Williamsburg area. The farm used to be in Williamsburg, and there is just endless amounts of information. Just for an example, again, Josiah Cockfield. He was a sharpshooter for Marion, and when I first came to Lake City, after I inherited this, I was down the street at a furniture store, and I'm talking to them and to the owners, and they start talking about that they're Cockfields, and then that they came from Josiah, and I have his signature on some of my paperwork, and so then I go home. And I'm reading John James' son, I'm forgetting his first name, but his book. And within a couple chapters, they're saying, Marion really protected his men. He didn't want them to get injured. And they mention a battle, and he goes, for instance, in this battle, only one person died. And then he goes on to correct himself. He says, he really didn't die. He got shot in the breast, and his name was Josiah Cockfield. So that's how close all this comes to me. So, and it's just so much fun because all these names from that time period keep popping up all over the place.
So the festival is when? Tell us one more time and how they can get a hold of it.
The festival is February 18th and 19th. You can look us up at The American Heritage Festival. You can look us up on Facebook. We're bringing in the Kings Rangers this year from Michigan. And we'll have the 33rd of Foot, and the 2nd South Carolina. We'll have the 3rd Continental Dragoons. We have quite a number of Revolutionary War reenactors that come, but it's always going to be on President's Day weekend.
And Lake City is located where in South Carolina?
Well, it's a half hour south of Florence. It's an hour and a half west of Myrtle Beach. It's about an hour and a half northwest of Charleston.
The festival seems to grow every year, and
yes.
And it's It's a wonderful time for the families to come out and learn a little bit of history. And if they're not really interested in the Revolutionary War history, you got enough there to pique their interest on other historical narratives out there. So
Yeah, we've been lucky. We've had some pretty big names come out to talk. We had Congressman Clyburn came last year, and so did George Patton's grandson came last year, and he's coming back. He had so much fun. He wants to come back, and we have another name out there. I don't want to say yet, but we're hoping to get kind of a big name. So we'll see. We'll see if you get it. You never know. Sometimes you don't want to say you got somebody until you really have that commitment.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you.